Despite all the injuries, the Orioles starting rotation is kind of stabilized over the past month or so. But if another opening does arise or a need arises, Brandon Young might be the next guy waiting in the wings in AAA. And so to hear more about who is Brandon Young and what he could bring to the Orioles either this year or next, we're going to hear from the man himself. Brandon Young joins us on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to be joined by a special guest, Orioles right-handed pitching prospect Brandon Young, who has been tearing it up in AAA and could be on the verge of a major league call-up, is going to join the show. We talk about Young's fantastic 2024 season between AA and AAA, the fact that Mike Elias has publicly mentioned him as an option for the O's rotation down the stretch, how he became a different pitcher since recovering from Tommy John surgery, why he signed with the Orioles after that crazy year and draft in 2020, and why Brandon Young, for a very long time, did not own a smartphone. But that and more is all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. So before we get with our interview with Brandon Young, just want to get I guess there's one Orioles news and note to get to off the top, and then we'll talk a little bit about Young's season, his statistics, what he can bring before we actually talk to the 26-year-old right-hander in AAA with the Orioles. But first, I do want to mention that there is one kind of Orioles adjacent roster move to get to, and that is that Cole Irvin, who was designated for assignment on Sunday when the Orioles activated Jacob Webb off the injured list. They actually made two moves Sunday. Jacob Webb and Heston Kjerstad both returned from injury to join the roster, and Irvin and Nick Maton were both DFA'd. We haven't heard anything yet about Maton if he has been claimed, but Cole Irvin had. On Monday, the Minnesota Twins claimed Cole Irvin off waivers from the Orioles. Now, it was a little surprising in the fact that Irvin was already DFA'd once earlier this year and was not claimed. He passed through waivers. He jumped off the 40-man, but stayed in the O's organization in AAA, pitched down there for a little bit. The O's had a need. They called him back up, but the writing was on the wall. He's basically pitched twice in September, essentially, has Cole Irvin, and you knew, okay, Webb's coming back. Coulomb should be back soon. Irvin was more than likely going to be the first guy to go. The O's really just weren't using him in this division race. So it would have been a tough decision, and I'm sure it was. Now, if Irvin had cleared waivers again, which is honestly what I thought was going to happen, he would have had the right of refusal to say, no, I don't want to go to AAA. I want to become a free agent. Because once you've already cleared waivers once, like he did earlier this year, if you do it a second time, you have the ability to say, I'm not going to AAA. I'm becoming a free agent, and hopefully can sign with someone else. So I think that is what the O's would have liked, and maybe they could have talked him into sticking with this team in AAA, but good for Cole Irvin. He gets a major league opportunity. Now, the Twins are interesting as well because they are in a playoff fight too. They currently hold the final wild card spot in the American League. And I know the Orioles have been playing bad recently. Honestly, the Twins have been playing worse baseball. Their lead is dwindling and dwindling for that final wild card spot. At one point, they were in the race for the AL Central. That is certainly not the case any longer. Instead, they are kind of floundering a bit. Their starting pitching hasn't been very good. Their offense has been injured and up and down. So maybe they could use these innings from Cole Irvin. Now, the Orioles go to Minnesota for the final series of the year against the Twins, and maybe they could see Irvin. He may not be inserted into the starting rotation. It could be more of just a guy to eat innings. But because of some injuries they've had, a couple of rookies in David Festa and Zebby Matthews have both not been great in the rotation. Simeon Wood-Richardson, also a young pitcher who's been okay. They need some rotation help, so it makes sense that the team's just trying to fight their way into the postseason, would look for some stabilizing innings from a veteran. That's what they're going to get from Cole Irvin. You never know if he could end up back with the Orioles, but at this point it seems unlikely. And it was a trade where the O's went out and gave up Darrell Hernandez, who was a solid prospect who has debuted with the A's since then, but was just so buried in the Orioles infield backlog that it made him a bit expendable to go and get some starting pitching. Irvin was up and down last year. He was really good for a stretch earlier this year. Then it all kind of fell apart for him to get DFA'd twice. And that is kind of the tenure of Cole Irvin. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more in the offseason probably, but more than likely it is now officially the Cole Irvin tenure in Baltimore is done. And while he probably didn't pitch as well as he would have liked, he did some amazing things for this Baltimore team. He was a great clubhouse leader. He was fantastic in the Baltimore community as well. I will look back positively on the Cole Irvin time, despite the fact that at times the results on the field probably weren't what the Orioles wanted. Now, they knew they weren't going to get a number 2 starter. They were acquiring a number 5 starter, an innings eater. Sometimes he was better than that. Unfortunately, a lot of times he was worse than that. And that is why he is no longer on this roster. But one of the reasons the Orioles may need to, potentially at some point this year or even next year, turn to a guy like Brandon Young in their starting rotation is because Cole Irvin hasn't been exactly what they want him to be. Brandon Young, who the Orioles signed as an undrafted free agent after the 2020 draft. Remember, there was only 5 rounds in that draft. They signed him out of Louisiana and added him to the system. And you didn't know a lot about this guy, but he was pretty good coming up the minors. 2021, his first season in the minor leagues, was fantastic. He goes to Double-A in 2022, makes 3 starts, and something is not right. And he ends up having to get Tommy John surgery. And that is never what you want. He misses the rest of 2022. He returns to throw about 15, doing some math here, about 40 innings at high A and Double-A at the end of last year, coming back from the Tommy John. But really 2024 is his first full season back from Tommy John surgery for the 26-year-old 6'6" right-hander. And he has been fantastic. O sent him back to Double-A, 7 starts down there. He struck out, 41% of the batters he faced while walking 5%. They were like, yeah, this guy's too good for Double-A. Let's get him up to Triple-A. They did that, and he has been fantastic. He's been in the Norfolk rotation for most of the year. In 84 innings, he has a 3.32 ERA with the Tides with a 27% strikeout rate and a 9% walk rate. Really good numbers there from Brandon Young. In terms of the stuff, it is really a 5-pitch mix at this point, although we'll see where the cutter and the slider come together. But 4-seamer, changeup, curveball, cutter, and slider is what he throws. And that 4-seam fastball, that is the thing that makes him kind of different. Now, you can see if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, again, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can see the Brandon Young pitch mix here, courtesy of Baseball Savant and StatCast. He throws that fastball over 40% of the time. It's his main pitch, but you can see it's basically 92, 93. It's not big velocity, but what it does have is good spin rate. It has really good induced vertical break. What does that mean? It drops less, so it almost seems like it's rising to the hitters, which makes it really hard to square up. That's why guys are hitting just 160 with a 33% swing and miss rate against Young's 4-seam fastball this year. It's been a great pitch. The changeup has been his main secondary. Hasn't gotten as much swing and miss, but nobody really squares it up that much, which has been good. And then he has a big overhand curveball, which scouts have really liked. It hasn't had the results he wanted this year. Opponents have hit 283 against that curveball, but he's also tossed in a slider that's actually had more success, and I think has added to his repertoire even more to have those 2 breaking balls. It's an exciting pitcher. I mentioned he's been great in Triple-A. He threw 5 1/3 scoreless innings in Norfolk on Friday, and Mike Elias has mentioned him as being an option for the Orioles. If Mike Elias says your name to the media, that means you are clearly at the forefront of conversations if the O's are looking to call you up. So I wanted to hear more from Brandon Young. So let's talk about who is Brandon Young. Well, we'll hear it from the source himself. Coming up after this break, we will chat with Orioles right-handed pitching prospect, Brandon Young. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. All you do with Prize Picks after you download the app is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's truly that simple. And in September, one Caleb Williams passing yard on a football Sunday gets you a win on Prize Picks every week in September. And you only need 4 wins to start winning money at Prize Picks. So if you're getting a free one from Caleb Williams, well, that's a pretty good deal. So you might want to sign up for that over at Prize Picks. You can win 100 times your money. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. And that is at Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, so we are pleased to be joined by Orioles right-handed pitcher Brandon Young, who's putting together a phenomenal season in AAA Norfolk and is potentially, if not this year, then definitely in 2025, poised for a call-up to the big leagues. And Brandon, first of all, thank you so much for taking some time to hop on the podcast here.
Yeah, appreciate you, Connor.
So let's talk about your season so far. And I guess, fresh on your mind is 5 1/3 scoreless innings on Friday night for the Norfolk Tides. I know we're coming down to the wire here of this season. Schedule-wise, are you making one more start? I think the schedule would work out. Or you have 2 more starts in there in that AAA schedule?
Yeah, one more.
So how do you kind of feel at this point? You are, potentially, if the call doesn't come, 1 start away from the end of your 2024. How are you kind of assessing how you've pitched this year so far?
Just excited to make it healthy, have a healthy season, honestly. That was big. Made some good strides along the way, some tweaks here and there. But just to see, not really the success I've had, just the consistency, I'd say, is the big thing. It's been fun.
And you mentioned being healthy. You come back from the Tommy John surgery, which I didn't know was the second one of your life, although I know it's been a while since TJ number 1. Was there anything you learned from TJ number 2, considering it came, 10 years after the first one? And how did that rehab go as you made your way back at the end of last year?
Yeah, the first one, I was 13, 14 years old going through it and was just a kid going through, I didn't really look at it as a huge thing happening in my life. I was like, I'm going to pitch again. I'll be no problem. Just, give me a year or so. But the second time around was a lot different, a lot more tougher mentally, I'd say. Just getting through the bumps and bruises of my arm, just not feeling good at all, coming back from surgery again, getting the range of motion back, starting throwing, getting on the mound, and having it feel pretty foreign for the second time was, just a little different. But being older, maybe a little more wiser, and just trying to keep a routine day to day kind of helped me along the way.
I know you threw about 40-ish innings at the end of last year when you came back. Was there a point there where you felt, I'm all the way back to the guy I felt like before the surgery? Did it take until this year? Was there a moment like that?
In those 40 innings last year, not really. Still just not, kind of just like a fog, kind of like super close, but like just didn't feel right. It wasn't syncing up mechanically. But definitely this year, I want to say in spring training, come out and velo was up, stuff was good, and was like locating it and was like, all right, I kind of feel, back to myself again.
I did want to ask about that stuff because it's a heavy fastball usage. It's not a fastball that is going to, at least in 2024 in professional baseball, pop the radar gun every single time. I know you're consistently kind of 93 out there, but this is a pitch that nobody's hitting in AAA right now. Opponents are hitting 160 against your fastball. What leads to those numbers in a pitch that you can rely on, you can command, and you can get guys out? I mean, you can get a swing and miss with your fastball. You can get a pop up. You get a lot of outs with that pitch. How has it gotten to that point, and why does it play the way it does, despite the fact that 93 is still 93? But you see guys even on your own team when Chase McDermott's touching 97 and 98, and you're still having all the success that you are.
Sure, yeah. Chase and I have some similarities on the fastball, like the vertical ride, some spin rate stuff, and just kind of the angle we're throwing at. I'm kind of a tall guy, but I'm really on the first base side of the rubber, so I think it creates a little different angle for the hitters to see. And I think I just executed well for the most part. I can kind of locate it where I want. So I think using it in different locations kind of helps it play up sometimes.
Was that something you knew just data-wise, the IVB, the spin rate, all that stuff? Was that something you were made aware of in high school, in college, at Louisiana, not until you got into the O system? When did that get put together? Like, I know my fastball's good, but now I'm seeing why.
Never knew why until going through the undrafted free agent process and having some interviews with different teams and only a couple of them showed me really what was going on and why it was kind of working. But yeah, in high school and college, I was really, really over the top and just threw fastballs by guys with, sometimes I'd run it up, mid to upper 90s, but usually, the low 90s range. But yeah, not until the O's and some other teams told me, hey, this is why, and showing me how I could improve that.
What was that process like? So 2020 draft, you're a guy who, if we had a normal year, would have heard your name called and been selected, I'm sure, but it's a 5-round draft and there was a cap on what you could give out to the undrafted free agents. So more than any other time, it was, I think, power to the players in that, you all pitched to me why I should sign for your team because it's not really as much of a money thing. So what did that process look like? And if you care to share, what was something that the Orioles showed you or told you that made you sign that contract with Baltimore?
Yeah, sure. It was actually a crazy day. Was home in Texas, but at a buddy's lake house, and woke up at, my agent told me, hey, 8 a.m. starts the process. You might get a call or something. And 8 a.m. hit. Woke up early, and my phone, I was doing Zoom calls and questionnaires and calling all these guys pretty much all day until like 8 p.m. When I finally made the decision. And during 2020, the Orioles weren't exactly the best Major League Baseball team. And, the way they pitched me their pitching like department, their mechanical stuff, the pitch metrics, how they could improve all of my pitches and what I could be working on, really, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to know why my fastball was good, why my changeup plays, and like other stuff I could really improve on. And they did a good job of that.
So you chose in 12 hours. I'm sure it was because, teams were just waiting for that deadline, waiting, because there was way more undrafted free agents than there ever has been, there ever will be after the draft, really. So who else got in on that decision with you? Did you put it all on yourself? Did you get some advice? I know it was kind of a quick turnaround to make that call.
Yeah, it was a quick turnaround. It was like college recruitment like season in just one day. Like but same. It was just like facility based. Like you said, the money wasn't really the big issue. Sucks it was only $20,000, but it was an opportunity to play professional baseball, and I couldn't really pass it up.
Was there anybody else you talked to and said, hey, am I making the right decision? Or did you just say, I've heard what they have to say, I'm going to Baltimore?
Yeah, I was with my family all day, and I kind of just was outside most of the day, kind of just pondering. It was really up to Seattle and Baltimore, honestly, and I kind of just flip-flopped from those two and talked to my agent a little bit and just went with the Orioles. Something felt right, and I'm glad I made that decision for sure.
So we'll get back to our conversation with Orioles pitching prospect Brandon Young in just a moment. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. You can't beat that deal. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So to do all that and get your wagers in as well, just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. So we're talking about this 2024 season and really all the steps it's taken to get to this point. And we talked about how your stats have been great. Your season's been fantastic in AAA. I'm sure you heard, and I'm sure people talked to you when it happened, with that Mike Elias likes to keep things close to the vest, but he did mention you by name, talking to the media about options in AAA. You're very aware that the Orioles have had a whole lot of starting pitching injuries at the major league level. And while that didn't mean you were getting called up the next day, and we all knew that, did it even just give you a little bit of, okay, I'm doing the right things down here, knowing that the big league GM, who's the guy who makes these decisions, is clearly had me at the front of his mind? Because if Elias is saying a name to the media, that probably means that name is coming up every single day in those internal discussions in the warehouse.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I think, like you said, it's probably just something I'm doing right, I guess. I had no idea that he said that or when or what happened, but it was actually, I was about to catch a first pitch before one of our Norfolk games, and Chase McDermott told me. he's like, "Hey, dude, Mike just said this about you," and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." But other than that, I haven't really thought about it too much. Just trying to keep doing my thing.
So we get to the point where you've got one start remaining, 2024. The season ends in AAA about a week and change before the big league season does. And even if you don't get that call, there's always players that the Orioles are telling, hey, we're trying to make a postseason run if we do need arms. Have you thought about that process at all? Because with the way you've pitched in AAA and the fact that the Orioles certainly have some injuries at the big league level in terms of the starting rotation, where your time in 2024 may be extended just because you might be on call a little bit. Have you thought about that at all as this AAA season winds down?
Not really. Like, if it happens, that's awesome. I'm ready for it, and I'm obviously super excited. It's been my dream since I was a kid to be a big leaguer. So if that happens, it happens. But honestly, just trying to stay consistent to the routine, week by week. And if they extend me or want me to keep throwing, I'll do that. But if not, I can go home to Texas and start my off season.
Have you talked to any of the guys who have gotten that chance? I know Chase got the one start. Unfortunately, he went down with the injury. Cade Povich is kind of sticking for now, especially with Grayson Rodriguez out at the big league level. There's been some other guys who have gone up and down. Do you kind of pick their brains, especially when, I know for Chase, I know for Cade, they did come back down after that first stint. Do you go and pick their brains just about what that big league experience is like?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that, they, we're happy to share. It's an unforgettable experience, and I wanted to kind of know the ins and outs of it, how it went. Povich is actually, or was my roommate here in Norfolk at the apartment, so I got to talk to him. I mean, his first start was in Toronto, full packed out stadium. He said, dude, it was unreal, just having the emotions, the, adrenaline kind of just, fuel you for that game. It was pretty cool to hear them say stuff like that.
So you mentioned about going back to Texas in the off season. It's an important off season for you, whether or not that call comes in the next couple of weeks. You'll be Rule 5 eligible this off season. I think anyone who at least covers this team, like myself, has slotted you in as one of the top names of, hey, the Orioles are going to add this guy to the 40 man, and you'll be hopefully one step closer to the big league roster. So what does that off season look like now that you have finished a fully healthy season going into an off season where you kind of had a weird one back in 2023 and obviously with the surgery in 22, and now you're closer to the major leagues than you've ever been? You could potentially be on the 40 man roster during the off season. What does that look like when you get back to Texas?
Yeah, if that happens, it happens. That'd be awesome. But honestly, nothing really changes. I'm just going to try and, replicate what I did last year. Just kind of relax for the first couple weeks and, get started on training, get started on throwing, and just kind of enjoying the off season, just enjoying, my family. I'm pretty close to them, like 2 or 3 minutes from where I grew up. So it'll be cool to, get some home cooked meals from mom and pop and just, live outdoors and kind of just relax, honestly.
Does any of the staff, in the past, like guys like Mitch Plasmeyer or Justin Ramsey or whomever, do they send you home with any homework? Is there anything to work on? Do you send yourself home with homework about getting better for next year? Anything specific that you look at throughout the season that you're like, all right, I got the winter to come back to Sarasota with this next February?
Yeah, there's some homework for sure to be done. There's always improvements to be done. I don't know anything off the top of my mind other than probably clean up some mechanical deficiencies, some stuff along the lines of that. A lot of strengthening, maybe just not in my shoulder or even core to sustain, hopefully, the amount of innings I'll be able to throw in the big leagues. But yeah, I'm sure Ramsey's going to send me home some stuff for sure.
So I do got to ask, you've seen a lot of talented arms. The Orioles, you've been a part of this rebuild of the organization. You were in pretty close to the ground floor, being a 2020 guy who joined the organization. It's kind of been seen narrative-wise as the hitting came first, and now we're going through all these pitching prospects getting closer and closer to the big leagues, yourself included. Who are some guys who you've played with throughout this system? I know you mentioned you talked to Chase. Cade was your roommate. Those are two guys who have debuted already, who really impress you and that you try and learn some stuff from, or anybody that you go up to and say, hey, how do you throw that pitch? How do you get that ball to spin like that? Just guys that you've seen play alongside you that have impressed you so far.
Yeah, I'd say any guy that pitches on the Norfolk team I've talked to and asked like at least something about it. We've had recently Trevor Rogers and Adrian Hauser come and start for us, and to see them go about their business is pretty cool, and to kind of follow along with some of the stuff they do. As far as arms who have impressed me, I got two, and that's Cade Stroud and Nolan Hoffman. Those are two good buddies of mine, and their stuff is ridiculous. And I wouldn't say, both of them have had pretty good seasons, I would say.
Yeah, watching Cade run it up towards 100 is always fun. And Nolan Hoffman, very fun to watch for a different reason. The Orioles fans loved a guy like Darren O'Day, a sidewinder. Nolan is not quite the sidewinder that O'Day was, but that is always something fun to watch come out of the bullpen. So another guy that hopefully can get up to the big leagues as well. So really the last thing I got to ask you about is what has been the kind of non-baseball Brandon Young story. Whenever anyone writes about you, talks about you, it's that the year is 2024 and you just acquired a smartphone, I've been told. And so what pushed you over the edge to switch it from the flip phone with a smartphone that it feels like you're recording this on right now? What sent you to that decision in 2024?
It's kind of funny how that's like one of the main things that gets thrown out with my name. I figured it wasn't really a big deal, but I guess in now today's age, everything's digital. Dude, I honestly miss my flip phone even more now that I've got this. This past off season, my girlfriend and I got on the same phone plan, and they had an opportunity for an iPhone, and it just made a lot more sense with me traveling all over the United States and to not know where restaurants are at, banking info, even taking pictures of like cool stuff. I like to go out in nature and hike and stuff, and to have obviously location and maps is a huge part of that. So that's definitely the reason why I got that.
I gotta ask you, number one thing that you're like, okay, you know what, this was worth getting the iPhone, and number one thing you missed the most out of not having the flip phone anymore.
Number one thing I miss the most is just the lack of distractions I had. I can, just pick up my phone and just either look something up or go watch a YouTube video or something. But the one thing I do like about it is I want to say just videos, just watching videos and stuff. I can, track baseball. I can look at my mechanics. I can do slow-mo and stuff like that. So that's probably the biggest help, honestly.
Yeah, you can get off the mound and you can watch your start again, which maybe there's some flip phones that have the capacity to do that, but probably not as easy as the iPhone is. Well, Brandon, I guess the last thing for you is, what do you, as you get down to 2024 and this season ends, what do you think will be the one thing, if of course the call up doesn't come, because that will obviously, if that comes, be the one thing you remember from 2024. But if it doesn't come, it's still been a fantastic season. What do you think the memorable moment will be when you look back on your 2024 season between Bowie and Norfolk?
One memorable thing, I would say, when we were in Scranton, my second AAA start, I got the win, and we have kind of this like post-game celebration, and at home we do it differently. On the road, we don't want to it's basically we throw something up, and I broke like a ceiling tile, and I got most of the team to sign that ceiling tile, and I have that for my first AAA win. So that's pretty memorable, I'd say.
That is a unique piece of sports memorabilia, the signed ceiling tile from your first AAA win. Brandon, thank you so much. Good luck in the final start of the AAA season. I know the Tides had a long playoff run last year. Unfortunately, that won't be the case this year, but hopefully a strong finish for you. And we'll be rooting for you whenever the big league debut comes. Not out of the question that it could be this year, but obviously continued success into the offseason and into 2025.
Yes, sir, man. Appreciate you, Connor.